DRW, good to see you.
Max, good to see you, partner.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've done a podcast, but we talk quite frequently, and it's been a while since you've done them regularly. So I think the idea would be to have sort of a new series here. Working name right now is the Field Notes, but really it's just us kind of talking about kind of whatever we want. I think a lot of it will be macro and topical, but also just whatever niche thing that's piquing our curiosity at the time. Most people probably, if they're watching this on my social media stuff, may know you, but for those that don't, or if we're going to launch a new channel and put this on YouTube or something, maybe tell us who you are or tell them who you are.
Well, we're gonna have to do a double intro because I want to hear your intro again. But no,
Yeah.
David Ramsden-Wood, you're right. I did host a podcast called The Hot Take of the Day for a couple of years. Kind of started it during COVID, like pretty much. I love that Babylon Bee that said, "Meet Steve, the only American without a podcast." I always thought that was good. But yeah, I used to talk a lot about energy issues and accidentally pivoted kind of COVID issues and. I've been doing a whole bunch of different things, but as you and I have been chatting more frequently with our little Oklahoma Broken Bow partnership, it seemed like the right time. And so I guess 20-year oil and gas guy, now private family office, run that myself, and I'm in law school full time because I was bored with retirement. So I cover the whole gamut now of topics from legal to energy to geopolitics and whatever I'm reading.
Yeah. Well, you've had some success, obviously, because you're quasi retired now. You've built some companies. You've had a lot of good commentary. I think you've been kicked off of LinkedIn multiple times. So you're one of the more interesting people I get to talk to on a regular basis. For anybody that doesn't know me, energy guy as well, background, oil and gas energy marketing company that I started and ran for about 10 years, and then recently sold that business in January of 2024. And so now working for that company still and out there helping folks with selling their oil and gas molecules. But I also do a bunch of side things as well. Real estate is a fun one. This media stuff is also fun. But excited to be here with you, DRW. We can take it whichever way you want to take it. But I kind of want to know how's the. Tell me a little bit before we launch into just topical stuff, like what the law school thing, like how's it going, and what drove you to do that? That's kind of crazy and a little bit masochistic.
I mean, it certainly is, and I must admit, I'm just about done. I've done my first year, and I'm doing a block week course right now, which is like accelerated trial practice. So we actually have a mock trial, which is kind of interesting. So why did I do it? I did it for mental stimulation. I
Yep.
think also like if you look back over the last 5 years, the Constitution has been obviously relatively important to the existence of our country since 1776. So I find the offense taken by the 1789 Alien Enemies Act that Trump evoked is actually like from the same time period the Constitution was put in place. So
Mm.
like from a time frame, we have a long history in this country. But just looking at what happened during COVID and with, I would say, executive overreach and generally the use of the Supreme Court either to advance initiatives or not and legislative initiatives, I thought law school would be just a great place for brain candy. And I think, I've always wanted to run for politics of some kind. I think I'm in the wrong state for that. But nonetheless, I thought maybe doing a legal career and becoming a prosecutor for 5 or 8 years and then making a move into politics was logical. I think as I've discovered, it's just introduced me to a whole new way of thinking, a whole new way of writing, and just a different view of what's going on in the country. So it actually, if anything, it might accelerate my jump into politics. So we'll see. I'm really enjoying it. I am shocked at the difference between the people coming out of undergraduate now and the ones I went to school with. They have really been indoctrinated, and like, I mean, like even just things like being bullied. Like when I was a kid, you got bullied and it made you stronger. And now, if you mispronounce someone, it's like the biggest offense you could possibly do in class, which is like, you know, like when conversations degenerate into your pronouns versus the national debt, It's or constitutional infringement. It's pretty shocking. So it's been an eye opener.
That's crazy. Well, I can't imagine being back in school right now, but I think the path that you're on, learning about this stuff, is extremely interesting given how many things seem to end up in the courts just all the time with all the politics stuff. I mean, there was all the weaponization of the court system in kind of this last election. And then I think what's been eye opening to me, and I don't know if you have a take on this, is like all the immigration stuff right now with the Supreme Court stepping in. And I don't know, like the fine details of it, but it seems like all these people were able to come in and there was no real laws around that. But then, like, the effort to remove people, all of a sudden now that's getting caught up in the courts. So it seems like the court system and the Supreme Court, maybe it always is in the spotlight, but definitely the last like 18 months, 24 months, it seems to be in the spotlight a lot.
Yeah, I mean, certainly Trump's executive actions sort of harken back to the era of the New Deal in 1930s with FDR. And and so I believe that there's some context to this, which is if the Supreme Court very clearly is extremely important politically, in that the three liberal justices virtually always vote their predictable way. And notwithstanding that there are some moderate conservatives, conservatives actually are like you can range more on issues than liberals can for whatever reason. But keeping the Supreme Court is probably the most important thing that the Republicans could do. So my take is that Trump is using executive orders to be able to get a whole bunch of topics before the Supreme Court that Thomas and Alito can rule on before
Mm,
retiring. And then he can replace them with young conservative justices before he's out in 2028, which would mean that we would keep the that the Republican side would keep the Supreme Court for effectively the next 30 years.
right.
And that I think is the driver of this. And the other thing that gets missed in the media, people they get all excited about what the courts are ruling. They actually haven't been ruling on any of the merits. They've been effectively ruling on the temporary restraining orders that the lower courts have been putting in. So Trump administration will try and deport person A, their lawyers run to the courts, the district court puts a nationwide injunction that thou shall not deport anyone based on X. And so, what's really been brought to the Supreme Court so far is can these district courts rule on a class that hasn't been certified? And then can the district courts make a ruling on a case with an injunction without actually hearing the merits of the case at all? And so,
Mm.
like, we're in the very, very early innings of what we should see this summer coming out of the Supreme Court, but it will be fascinating. And yeah, we'll have a lot of takes on it over the next, coming months.
That is fascinating. Well, there's a lot of things to have takes on, and the Trump admin is trying to do a bunch of things at once. We've seen the tariff stuff this last month, the markets crater, then come all the way back. We're seeing hard assets like gold and Bitcoin, hit all-time highs. We're seeing the Japanese bond market kind of implode. We're seeing the U.S. bond market rates continuing to rise. I mean, you wrote a piece recently on your Substack, which is the hot take of the day Substack. Just your thoughts on some of the setup from a macro perspective here. And I've got a few thoughts as well. But man, I mean, it just seems like there's so many headlines and so much craziness outside of the markets, but within the markets alone, there's plenty to talk about.
So yeah, and I think I'll back it up. My view has been obviously Trump, he's a single term president because he's already run for one, and notwithstanding the Trump 2028 trolls that he likes to use to just set people off, I think
Yeah.
is constitutionally that's not going to happen. And quite frankly, Trump will be too old by 2028. And so this is like he has to jam everything into now, and that when the midterms come up, the market, in his view, would have to be higher. In order for the market to be higher, I think they need to clear out some of the excesses of what's been going on. So my view has strongly been that Trump was using tariff talk and trade talk and everything to talk the stock market down, to talk oil prices down, to talk inflation down, which would then allow the Fed to cut interest rates, which then hopefully would then lead to the lowering of the long-term treasury, which A would allow us to refinance the $10 trillion of debt that's coming due this year at 3.5% instead of 4.5, 5, and save $150 billion a year of interest. But then also the housing market, as we'll talk a lot about, is 80% of homeowners in the United States have a mortgage below 5%, and 60% have a mortgage below 4%. And so prices are very sticky on the upside. And so no one feels compelled to sell their house and move. So the housing market is totally stuck. And for the most part, the housing market is where most Americans house their assets. And so if Trump can get the 10-year and mortgage rates down sub 5, sub 4.5 through a slower economy and slower demand, then all of a sudden everything else happens that's good and houses become more affordable, debt becomes more affordable, and it makes America great again in theory. What we've seen is the bond market is having none of it, and certainly the carry trade, the basis trade, the Japanese implosion, where we're going with Bitcoin, the big great bill, the great big bill, or whatever they're calling it, with tax cuts.
Yeah.
I mean, we're headed exactly the opposite direction, and so now I have a whole bunch of concerns that Trump is not going to be able to accomplish what he wants because interest rates are not cooperating. I'm fascinated in your take because I know you've been a big Bitcoin guy for a long time, and with a Broken Bow real estate development and all the commercial stuff you're doing down in Oklahoma. Well, what's your take on all this?
I mean, I think that there is like a lot of people on Twitter and like Lynn Alden and others have popularized the saying that like nothing stops this train. And looking at Elon's efforts with Doge, he's clearly getting exhausted. I mean, beyond like the public pushback and the vandalism of the Teslas and all those things. I mean, I think that ultimately it has to go through the politicians to get these changes from a fiscal standpoint made. And you can sit here and attack USAID, which I think there was a lot of corruption there that was brought forward, although not really much litigation that's come out of that, which people will point to and say if there's all this corruption, then where are the people getting prosecuted? Which may be something that I'd be interested in you hearing. My thought there is that I think that they're doing it legally, even though it's kind of like waste and fraud and abuse. It's sort of like the system was set up to just be able to fund these NGOs and do these things to where technically they weren't breaking any laws, even though they were using taxpayer money to do all kinds of crazy, crazy things. And so it's like that effort to rein in the fiscal side. Often people were saying that it's impossible to do, and I had some hope that maybe they could start chipping away at that. It's looking more and more like it truly just isn't possible. The bond market to me is probably the most concerning thing because I don't see like a lot of inflation picking up right now in terms of where it was. I mean, I do think things are coming down. Oil prices are lower. Prices have stabilized across a bunch of different industries. Home prices are stagnant, maybe slightly higher from a year ago. But a lot of things in general, like I just don't think that the economy is white hot. I don't think it's growing at a crazy clip, and yet the bond market is, bonds are continuing to fall and yields are continuing to rise. So that is, I think, probably the administration's one of their biggest or bigger concerns. And I just don't know that coupled with, like you said, the tax cuts that he wants to push through. So it's even more pressure on the fiscal side. What's going on with Japan's market and trying to do yield curve control, and then it just yields just rapidly rising.
Yeah.
I don't know where it goes in the short term, but it seems like a lot of these efforts that they're trying to push forward, it's going to be a challenge to get certainly all or any of them done.
I totally agree. And I guess I put this in quotes, like nobody likes taxes, right? But at the end of the day, we have built a society of entitlements, and politicians always go back to the well for more spending. And like the truth of the matter is, when FDR introduced Social Security in 1935, life expectancy was 61, and you didn't get it until 65. And there were 33 workers for every retired person.
Mm.
Flash forward to today, post COVID, including that data, life expectancy is 78. You get it at 66 or 67. So you live for 13 years where you get it, and there's 2.6 workers for every retired person. Like So
And the birth rates collapsing as
and the
well.
birth rate, and then it's just it's not functional, and yet politicians are not willing to say we need to raise the retirement age because this, like, retirement is not a right, it's a privilege. And I'm deeply sorry for those who in the last 40 years haven't saved for retirement, but, like, we have to do something to address the spending, and then that's not even to talk on Medicare. So it will be interesting to see if this tax bill, if there's more resistance than we think, and then what ultimately is the negotiation. Do taxes stay where they are, and does spending get cut by $1 trillion to actually solve the bond market issue? Because again, if most Americans feel their wealth is based on their house price, at some point when mortgage rates are 7.5% and house prices have almost up 50% in the last 5 years, once the first people start selling, it could be like 2008, where, I don't know if you remember, but on my street, there were two or three houses for sale every couple blocks, and prices were just cratering. Different setup, but if you start seeing people have to sell, you're going to see prices fall 20-25% pretty quickly, I think.
I think structurally it's just so different than '08. I mean, right now, what is the stat? Like 50% of homeowners have no debt on their house. The amount of equity in homes. I mean, I guess like the bear case is that easy come, easy go, right? It's like people's equity has increased so much. But if you look at like the amount of houses that are underwater on their equity, I think in 2010, I saw a tweet that it was like 28% of homes were underwater on their equity. Today, it's like a half a percent of homes are underwater on their equity. So, and you've got, majority of fixed rate debt. People typically, the forced sellers only become forced if there's a reason. Now, could there be a big job loss recession and people bought too much home? Maybe, but a lot of the folks, again, are locked in at rates that are, under 5%. Certainly, many people under 4%. I mean, I don't know if you didn't refi your house whenever rates were low, then you were messing up, and most people did. And so, and you've also got all this fixed rate debt versus the floating rate debt in 2008. You've got lending requirements that are much, much higher back then. I mean, I've borrowed, debt to go build homes, and I can tell you they want, 35% down if you're doing like rental properties. They want, a full medical exam to figure out all your financial stuff. They make you do financial disclosures very frequently. And so, versus the stories you hear in '08 and leading up to
Right.
it, that people could just go get a house and didn't have to put anything down. So I think that there's way more, to summarize it, way more equity in homes. There is a lot of fixed rate debt, so people aren't feeling the stress of the higher rates. There's a lot of people in the boomer class that have paid off their house. And so if half of homes in the US have no debt, then I just have a hard time seeing like a ton of forced liquidation type sellers. Doesn't mean there won't be stress, but I just think the setup's totally different than '08.
I I definitely agree with you. So then let me pose this question to you. So how does the US and Japan, Japan's been in this bizarre stagflation for 30 years. I believe from my friend Mark Rosano, who is another partner on some business we have on hydroelectric dams back in the Northeast US. Super smart guy. He said that the 40-year bond auction in Japan this week was the weakest since 1987. And so effectively, they have to raise their rates or they have to inflate the heck out of their currency. And we seem to be going into these financial situations where there are so many less options. So now we see the 10-year creeping. Mark's quite convinced the 10-year goes to 5% to 5.1 this summer. Uh, when the great big bill, or big, what is it called? What are they calling it? The big
I can't
beautiful bill.
remember
The big
something.
beautiful bill. When the big beautiful bill actually gets passed, he thinks the 10-year goes to 5 to 5.1%, and that's where you see buyers, and that there's really nothing structurally that takes it away from that. What do you see in the world of stocks, crypto, gold, the US economy when the 10-year is 5.1%?
They have to. They're going to have to yield. The Fed's going to have to step in. I mean, that's just what's going to happen, and they won't want to do it until unless there's something like a Democrat trying to run for office, which happened. We saw what happened in September. I mean, anybody with a pulse could have told you when the Fed was going to cut rates. They were going to cut right before the election to try to boost the economy. So right now, they don't want to do it. They feel like this is the only ammo they really have, and they don't want to shoot their shot until things are really bad. So I think in the past, they were trying to walk on this tightrope. Inflation really wasn't a thing for a long time, and it was kind of like anytime they saw even a ripple of trouble, they were stepping in, doing QE, lowering rates. Whereas now I think they've been spooked by this wave of inflation that we had recently, and so it's like if they're going to shoot their shot, they better make sure that when they shoot it, it's the right time, because if they do it too soon, then a job loss recession does hit. Well, now they've ran out. They've already used all the ammo that they have, and so I think that they're going to wait probably too late, and probably till it's the last possible moment that they can do it. But ultimately, like the total setup and the reason why I like Bitcoin, gold, and other hard assets is because they have to inflate the money. I mean, like that's just where it's going to go. You can't service the
Mhm.
debt. We can't stop spending. The only answer is to inflate away the money. I mean, that's literally our only mathematical choice here, unless something on the political side changes, and it would be political. I mean, and if Trump can't do it, then who can do it, right?
Right.
I mean, that's
Oh,
kind of where you know what I'm saying.
I totally agree, and it's kind of a sad situation that we backed ourselves into this. But I agree with you because on the one hand, my thesis is like how there's you got in order to make money in the capitalist society, there has to be multiple ways to win, and I think the people who have the most options are the ones who have the most ways to win. Like you think about all these businesses that started out, Amazon started out as a bookseller, and now look at the business that it is today. Elon, for all intents and purposes, started out trying to build rocket ships after the PayPal and the MapQuest effectively that he built. And Tesla is really what he's best known for. So, but on the one hand, if interest rates fall because we enter a pseudo recession and we get mortgage rates down to 3.8%, something like that, well, then the housing market moves and you know there's a huge amount of latent demand to upsize your house. You have young families, you have boomers that are trying to change. Like there's all of these people wanting to move and you haven't. So house prices I think do well. Certainly new builds I think do well. And then in the other scenario they have to inflate the heck out of everything, and then hard assets like houses go to the moon. So we are in this interesting setup that's very different, I agree with you, than 2008. uh,
I don't
I
see how
just
house prices come down. I mean, I really, it's they're already at an unsustainably high level. To buy to so I bought my house in 2019, but it was built in 2015,
Yeah.
and the replacement cost of that home to get a brand new house the same size in the same area, like the neighborhood, like our developers building a neighborhood next to ours, and they're listing the same size house as the one I own for $1 million more than what it cost me to buy the house 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And anybody that looks at that, you're just like, why would I? But you can buy a used now. On my house has only gone up, maybe a couple $100,000, which is still a lot to go up in that period of time. But like most people, me included, it's like very hard to see buying a new house and paying that kind of money when you could just go buy a used one that is much cheaper, and you're basically getting a very similar product. So I mean, I just don't know that. I don't see a good scenario where, like, even though I'm saying it's unsustainable, like labor costs have gone up, raw material costs have gone up. Like, home builders are smart. They don't price things the way that it costs them. They price things based off the market price. So maybe if there's like a prolonged period of stagnation and guys get desperate, they'll start cutting the pricing. But I think, at least in my market, and this is all very market specific, there
Mhm.
hasn't been some huge glut of supply. It's just like they're kind of building as needed. It's like they'll build a couple homes and sell them, then build a couple homes and sell them. I know some areas like Austin and Dallas, there's been massive, increases in supply. So maybe there the pressure's felt more. But man, home prices are a major problem. I think it's worse in Canada, but it's certainly becoming a big problem in the U.S.
What do you think comes of Gavin Newsom, California, their economy, and the houses in Malibu that what the stat I've heard is that the average house that burned was like 7,000 square feet, and that the building cost in California is 1,000 a square foot, and that the average insurance to cover the house was like 3.5 million. So there's a delta for all the homeowners there who thought they had a $7 million replacement cost house. They only have 3.5 million to rebuild. They don't have the delta cash. So you have whatever the number is, 10,000 homes and a whole bunch of people who were property rich that now A, don't have houses, B, have environmental issues to rebuild because of building regulations, and C, have really nowhere to go in the California economy, which has the highest taxes in the country other than probably New York. What do you see a whole bunch of migration, and what happens to the California political scene in your view in the coming 4 years as the 2028 elections come?
Well, I mean, like the other issue too that you didn't mention there was that I think some of them were able to be grandfathered in on their property taxes, and then they only have so much time to rebuild, or then that resets. Or if they don't build it to a certain specification, then it does. They have to get a step up in their tax basis as well. I don't know how California from the political scene. And the other thing I'll say about the homes is that the thing they had going for them was the location. I mean, if you're at a beautiful location or if you're on the coast, you've always got that going for you. And that is a huge thing in real estate because you can't really replace that. But the problem is the location can turn sour not because of the view or because of where it's located, but because of the politics. So it's like they've got that going for them, but at the same time, they've got this, political headwinds in terms of living in that state. I think we've already seen a lot of migration. I think Texas will soon be the largest state in the United States within the next 10 to 15 years. If the current trends hold, California is losing population. And this is a problem with, really, we've seen it going as far back as the Roman Empire, which I know is cliche to bring up, but like anytime you're letting the populace vote on things and you see wealth gaps starting to expand, which happened very much in the Roman Empire as they would conquer some new place, all the generals and all the politicians would get ultra rich, and then everybody else would be living on their wheat daily allocation of grain or whatever, and they weren't seeing that wealth effect rising them up, and so you got a lot of populist revolt. It ultimately had them doing a lot of stuff in the Senate where they were demanding more representation, which they got, and then there was a lot of violence that came from that, and ultimately it ended up in a dictatorship. And then ultimately it collapsed. But I'm not saying we're going there. But I think with California, the challenge is that you have a lot of people that are struggling because they're not in that ultra elite wealth category, and those people have a vote, and they get the same vote as somebody who's worth $1 billion gets a vote. They each get one vote, and they're going to continue to the politicians in California can continue to pander to those votes, and make them a bunch of promises about how these socialized forms of government are going to help things, and they're not going to help things. So I think it's a bad situation there. I know there's a lot of people on Twitter that talk up California, and it's a beautiful place to live, and there's a lot of opportunities I think still there, but it's also becoming a very challenging place to live for all the reasons we've talked about.
Tell me about how's Oklahoma doing in all of this, with the COVID work from home trend. Obviously, I found it funny that basically once JP Morgan said everyone needs to go back to work, all of a sudden, remember the new normal was everyone could work from home, and every company jumped in line as fast as they possibly could to get people back. And part of that to me is because in Denver, I think the vacancy rate downtown Denver is something like 35%. I saw two buildings that were valued in 2019 at $200 million just transacted for something like 7 million, and they were planning on turning them into
Mm.
700 residential units because there's nobody there. But who holds commercial debt are the regional banks and the pension funds. And if they find that all of a sudden their $200 million asset is now worth 7 million, that's a huge hole in retirement. So you see this like big push back to cities. What does that do to states like Oklahoma that may have picked up some people uh, during COVID? And how is the state doing overall? I mean, as you know, I was just in Tulsa and head down to Broken Bow, and it's such a beautiful part of the world. I'm not sure how many people have been to Eastern Oklahoma, but it's gorgeous.
Yeah, it is. There's some great spots in the state, and I think the state historically has been pretty simple to understand in a lot of ways because it's primarily oil and gas driven in the economy. We've got some other sectors, agriculture, and we're actually a decent manufacturing hub because of our central location within the United States. But I would say that we've seen some inward migration. I mean, I have friends that have just moved from Texas from the Dallas area up to Tulsa because they just were like it's getting crazy with property taxes and just the cost of living in general. And so I think that's been a theme. That being said, really I feel like the pulse here is going to be driven by the price of oil and the price of natural gas, and to the extent that we've seen like a revival in the MidCon with a lot of acquisitions and divestiture activity going on, people buying acreage in Oklahoma and planning on running rigs. And so we'll see if the oil price and the gas price cooperates to allow them to do that. But as long as, the oil and gas industry is strong, I mean, that is kind of the backbone of the state. And I think that flows through to commercial real estate. I think it flows through to all the other service based industries because, like most of the American economy, we've become so service based. There's hardly anything here left that we make, but oil and natural gas is something that we make. And so luckily we're a state that makes a decent amount of it. And that's going to kind of be what we hang our hat on. But I would flip the question back to you around the Denver thing. Cause man, like I've seen it in the last 10, 15 years, downtown Denver, it just becoming a place that like I don't really want to be. Whereas 10, 15 years ago, I liked going to downtown Denver. And now it's like, you stay down there and I'm worried my cars are going to get broken into. I got to find a place to lock it away at night. Worried about walking around with my kids with all the homeless people, and just have seen a lot of doomer stories on Twitter about the downfall of Denver. And I'm wondering, is that overhyped or is my intuitions correct, or what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think it's a little overhyped, but there's definitely an element to that. Like I would say the fall of San Francisco is probably overstated, but it's not what it was. I would go back to 2019. Downtown Denver was awesome. We were getting a lot of new restaurants. The vibe was good. A lot of people were working there. We've really seen that change, but the push has now been to Cherry Creek. And so Cherry Creek is like 8 minutes outside of downtown. They don't have nearly the commercial buildings yet, but the building there that's going in and the number of sort of small offices that are moving out of downtown into Cherry Creek is huge. It's where all the restaurants are. It's where all the expensive houses are. I kind of think of that area in Dallas. Um, Highland Park, kind of like where you just have this beautiful high end, and that's where everyone wants to hang out. So I think you're just seeing a bit of a push. And the reason I think Mike Johnston is vulnerable as mayor is he's been pushing some of these woke, I call them woke, whatever they are, policies around uh, drug use, open camping, sanctuary city. And I think people are getting tired of it. And so I believe that downtown Denver will be cleaned up in the next 5 years, but it's not what it was. And it's sad to see. Um, but again, it comes down to this wealth disparity. The people who have money are going to the places that are expensive, and Cherry Creek basically self-selects out homeless people, whereas downtown there is a higher tolerance for it because nobody wants to go there, and so it becomes this unvirtuous cycle,
Yeah.
sadly.
Well, you
But
see it in like, yeah, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I'm gonna say like it kind of reminds me of yeah, if you go to like LA County versus Orange County, it's just how night and day different it is, right? Like you go to fill up your gas in LA County if you're returning a rental car and you're like scared, right? But then you cross over into Orange County and it's like clean, there's no homeless people, it's see a Trump flag every once in a while. It's just a totally different environment in terms of the people there. They just said we're not going to stand for this and we're not going to allow, crime and homeless people to be here, and that it worked because when you go there it's nicer, you feel safe, you can walk around at night and it's beautiful, and then you cross over into LA County and it's like you're pretty nervous if it's
Right.
nighttime.
Well, I think like you're gonna I think that, not that I want to talk about illegal immigration per se, but I think it's related. Is if you believe there are 20 million people here who are living in some level of the shadow economy, both their kids and families, and they're generally they don't have credit, so they're living in apartments that maybe other people have that they pay cash for. 20 million people is like 8% of the US population. And they are doing jobs, whatever jobs they are, because our society takes money to do it. I think if you take those 20 million out, it really does create, 10 million kind of jobs where wages are high enough that there isn't the room for homeless people. Like, and again, I know mental illness and I'm not trying to like brush over what these issues are, but you've kind of been able to figure out a way not to work in the US
Hmm.
and get away with it. But under the new fraud, waste, and abuse cuts, and then eliminating 20 million people from the country, it seems like the whole strategy is geared around getting Americans back to work in jobs that allow them to have a long-term, like, add to society, and that by being more successful allows you to increase the birth rate, which, because right now it's so expensive and people don't have great stable jobs, people are opting not to have kids. So it is interesting that Trump's sort of doing like a full wholesome reset of America's economy, it would seem, and society, quite frankly. I'm curious if
Do,
you agree with that take.
yeah, yeah. Do you think? Well, I think that it's interesting because I do feel like immigration is important for us in a lot of ways. I think it's the illegal immigration part that's the challenge, right? I mean, because if
For
you look
sure.
at population trends, we need more people to grow the economy. And if you look at what's happening in China, it is, I mean, anybody that's bullish on China long term, I think it's just crazy because if you look at go to AI and ask AI if immigration trends continue in the US, how they've been, and if China's birth rate continues how it's been, at some point in like our kids or grandkids' lifetime, the US will have more people than China. Like it is in a spectacular collapse, a collapse that we've never seen other than like the Black Plague or like Genghis Khan. Like that, those are like the only, I mean, really, it's like they're looking to lose probably 75% of their population in the next 100 years. And the way that the US can avoid that type of outcome, because our birth rate's getting so low, is to bring new people in and to let them become productive members of society. The challenge is how do you do that in a way to
Hmm.
where everybody's happy? Because a lot of people aren't happy with it. And I mean, but look, like, I mean, my family, I'm like, my great grandparents immigrated here. Like, I know a lot of people that are first, second, third generation immigrants. So it's like, I mean, it's supposed to be the land of opportunity, but I get like the problem we're in now is the amount of people, how quick it happened, and the fact that they are not here legally. That is a humongous challenge. And I think that it needs to be fixed. And so what they're doing today is probably the best thing that we can do to have some kind of a reset. But long term, it would be advantageous to get the best and the brightest and get them here.
Yeah. Well, when I think about China, I think about the fact that their one-child policy led to 35 million more young men than women,
Mm.
which just numerically, I mean that's 35 million people, effectively the entire population of Canada, not quite, but close at 40 million, that will never get married because there literally is not a female partner. That more than anything, I think the level of discontent when you think about legacy building and like, I've thought about this a lot. I'm curious, your thoughts since you've sold your company. But like when you build your company and in a capitalist society, you focus so much on you and the building becomes your purpose. And then when you sell it, like the loss of purpose, at least for me, was so dramatic. And you sort of wake up and you're like, what have I done with my life? Well, then, I've now had 7 years since we sold our company. And I think about my kids and I think about my role in their life and the teaching and like the legacy. I can't imagine being in a world where there's no physical way you could have kids because there's no partner. What do you think about that in terms of your legacy and what your life would be like without kids and how it all came together?
Yeah, I do. And I had to have gone through those. I almost went through like a midlife crisis around the age of 30, 30, 31, somewhere in that. So about 7, 8 years ago. And I think it was really around, started a company when I was 27, more out of necessity than anything. It was kind of just like trying to figure out what I want to do and sort of fell into it. And then around, 4 or 5 years in, was having success and hitting like milestones that I'd set for myself that were out in the future. It's like, oh, if I could like have a company or like hire people or like have these financial milestones. And, in my head, I'm thinking this is like in my 40s, 50s, whatever. And then getting to it. And it wasn't even like I was, I know some people that have gotten crazy wealthy, like in their 20s and early 30s. It wasn't even like some crazy, like I made $100 million, but it was just like I was hitting these milestones earlier than, and then you have this moment where you're like, is this really what it what it feels like, right? It's like I thought if I had this number in my bank account, or I thought if I had this company with these people, that like I would feel like I made it or feel like there was this level of success. And really, I just felt the same. And that was like a weird moment where you start to kind of reevaluate the fact that you spend like every waking hour thinking about achieving these things. And then when you get them, it just doesn't feel the same. And there's been like a famous quote was like Matt Damon when he said he won the Oscar when he was really young, and he went home that night and felt sad for everybody that had to wait their whole life to get it, because once you get it, it doesn't feel. And this is like cliche to say these types of things, but I really do think there is a level of that, whether it's you sell your company, or whether it's you get that promotion that you wanted, or buy that house that you wanted, or whatever that milestone is. I think you kind of realize like this isn't really, you know, it's I mean, again, I feel cliche saying this, but it's kind of like the journey. And I think going back to your question around kids, it's like that's where I found so much of my purpose and meaning. And with like the China thing, I mean, that's got to be terrible to be in that situation for young men. And I think young men in general are struggling just with like, screen addiction and all these different things that they're faced with. Everybody has these high expectations, putting, you got to be 6'5" and you got to be making $200,000 a year. And there's a lot of like lost young men out there. And I would say that having a family, having kids, working hard in something that you enjoy and feeling like you have a purpose there is the best path that I've come up with. And I think that if a lot of people could get there, they'd be a lot happier. But people are struggling, man.
Yeah. So how do you tie that up with like what does one do about the great success that our society has built, right? Like we live, the poorest among us today live better than the best kings and richest people in the world did, 200 years ago. Even just the additional electricity and honestly, not to tie it to oil and gas per se, but like the ability of us to harness the world, harness the environment, harness like the ability to make things, construct AI is just the most incredible technology. Where do we go as a society to maybe bring back some of the joy or you know something because something
The,
feels missing, right? Like the hamster
it's
wheel
the
is a
struggle.
real
The
thing.
struggle is what's the struggle. It's like through struggle and through pain is where you get the joy, I think, in a lot of things in life, right? It's like when you're in some hard sport and it was really terrible and you didn't want to go to practice, but then you look back in a couple of years and you're like, remember how good a shape I was in? Like, remember when I achieved that thing? And it was through that pain and through that struggle. And that's what I worry about with, and that's why I think kids too, it's like the waking up in the middle of the night to change diapers, the financial stress of it, like the arguments about, trying to get their, everything, get them dressed and packed off to school every day. And like just all the things you have to go through. And then when you look back on it, that's where you found out that you take a lot of joy and a lot of pride from it. And I worry going into the future, especially with AI and like robotics and all these things, like where is the struggle going to be for people? Where are the things that they're going to have to overcome? I know financially it sucks right now for a lot of folks because the wealth gap has widened, but at the same time, to your point, quality of life, it's not like they're struggling to eat. It's like on one hand, it's like people are poorer than ever. It's like, yeah, well, people are fatter than ever too. So they're
Right.
clearly not struggling to eat. And so I think it's that lack of struggle in general that people, I don't know, man, I worry about that. I don't know your thoughts on that theme,
Yeah,
but
no, I agree. I mean, I totally agree with if everything came easy to you, and I think this is sort of that thought about like the first generation makes the money, the second generation keeps the money, and the third generation loses the money. At some point, you're just sort of surrounded by money, and you never go through the struggles and the trials and tribulations of making it. And once you've made it, it's it, not you never want to lose it and you know how hard it was, whereas if you just get given things, you win the lottery, what do they say, within 5 years most lottery winners
right.
end up bankrupt. So
Broker
yeah,
dead.
the
Yeah.
broker, yeah, I mean this the struggle is so real, and you're right, we don't have to remember that movie Wall-E. It was one of Disney's Pixar's good movies,
Yeah.
that like it really did address this sort of like what happened if robots and everything was done for you, which I think about like from conventional economics, and I know you talk about like the degrowth. So what happens if you go in a population spiral? Well, a population spiral is only kind of bad when you have the entitlements that we have. a
Mm.
little bit, right? Like if you think about, let's assume the planet has limited resources to some degree, and that we can only get so wealthy, and that when you think about it, in 1900, the population of the planet was 1 billion people. And today we're at 8 billion because we've been able to extract things from the earth at such a high and efficient rate that we can feed ourselves. But like, what happens if the population of the planet was 5 billion? Just like randomly. I mean, is that necessarily a bad thing? Like, I'm not advocating for degrowth by any stretch, but I just look at the concerns about birth numbers, and it's almost like the Ponzi scheme is once you hit 65 and there's 33 workers that are pumping into Social Security so that you can retire, but as long as there's new workers, it's always replentiful. But in the law firm context, like you work really, really hard to become a partner, and then you become a partner and you join all the golf clubs and you have the houses and you do the travel and you have the dinners, and like you don't have to work hard because you have the young people are doing all the billables, and it's like the most perfect Ponzi scheme of all time. Society with this growth has kind of been built into a bit of a Ponzi scheme, and like the way the Fed has managed their monetary policy has been to protect those over 65, lower interest rates, don't let anyone go bankrupt, avoid everything. And then, the people who are paying for it are the young people. Whereas if we had a degrowth thing where all of a sudden house prices, because there's less people and the wealth gets passed on to the young people, all of a sudden, a 25-year-old has the same quality of life as they had in the 60s, except that they can afford houses, they have AI, they have robotics, they have great jobs. I mean, it's sort of an interesting concept, and I don't really know what to do with it.
It'll kind of work itself out. I mean, like there was an interesting take from Naval, who I like and follow, and he was saying that he's not worried about the population decline thing. He's just kind of like it'll balance out. Like if it becomes to where, there's way less kids and there starts to be perks to having kids, right? Like if there's schools aren't as crowded, if there's not as much demand for starter homes, maybe starter homes will be cheaper and it's kind of like a hack, right? If you're the one person having lots of kids when no one else is having lots of kids over a long enough time frame, it'll kind of like, correct itself naturally. And it's like he likened it to us thinking we're going to run out of oil, right? Or all these other doomer predictions, like all these other Malthusian ideas where it's like there's going to be this thing like climate change, or we're going to run out of oil, or we're going to run out of food. And then like, like we just adjust, and then the market, this kind of invisible hand of like incentives, right? Like corrects it somehow, which is a white pill way to look at it. I don't know exactly how that would work with having more kids, but he seemed to not be too worried about it. Which I don't know, maybe.
The world is it's taken on interest because to your point, you can ask AI anything, and everyone can build a model, and we're just entering this just super unique time period. Um, Being in law school, my observation is it's amazing that universities have not reacted to what AI is. I liken it to the fax machine. When I started my career, we were still faxing back and forth to the field, and then our department got the first email address, and the guys were like, we should just keep faxing. And I'm like,
Hmm.
that just doesn't seem like a great idea. And now with AI, like if you're not using it every single day in your writing, in your thinking, in your companion, like walking through concepts, like there's no question that you should not be able to answer. There's no
Yeah.
theory, and so yet schools are still teaching this rote method instead of saying, hey, this is the concept. We want you to go learn this, teach this, debate this, and like amp up the speed at which we learn. It'll be interesting to see how society truly adapts to a true AI world that feels like it's in the first inning of a very, very long baseball game.
It's gonna be wild. I'm a believer in AI now. I was, skeptical 2 years ago. Whenever ChatGPT came out, it was kind of like, this is a fancy search engine. But some of the things that we're doing, like in our company with like machine learning and AI, and then you kind of start to extrapolate it out, and you're like, okay, if we could do this in 12 months, and it basically is like replacing the work of an entire department of accountants. Like we can crunch through the data really quickly. It's 99.9% accurate. We can take it and then do analysis with it. You can layer over like a chat bot on top of it, and do and ask it any question you want about the data. And you start to just kind of follow this forward. And you're like, I don't know that I would tell my kid to like be in the same line of work that I've kind of carved out my niche in oil and gas, because negotiating contracts or like, figuring out, the best markets to sell your product. Like, I think AI is going to be a lot better at that than humans here in the near future. And it's not just that; it's like everything. You start to apply that to everything, and you're like, man, this is it's really uncharted territory, and it's the first time in a long time. You go through these things where they talk about exponential growth in technology, and it happens fast, but like slow at the time. Like right when the
Yeah.
iPhone came out, you're like, this is cool, but then like 10 years of the iPhone, you're like, wow, my life is
Wow.
so different now, right? And I
So
think
different
we're
now.
in one of those moments.
What is your biggest investment right now? Like, what are you most, if you had to buy one thing that you had to keep for the next 5 years, what is it?
It's interesting. I'm pretty diversified. I have a lot of equity in either company. So, like, I still have equity in my company that I rolled forward. I've got equity in the real estate stuff. Um, so, equity, I would say it's like a third real estate, a third company equity. Well, no, I take that back. I don't know. I still have a good amount of what I would call equity, but not like stock equities, right? Like equities in private enterprises that I'm in. I've got Bitcoin, I've got some gold, and I've got a lot of in the equities world. What I've leaned towards prior to or after selling the company has been kind of income generating stuff that I can use that's more stable. So like credit funds, bond funds, things that are provide a higher rate than a treasury bill. But I mean, I think there's a good way to get kind of call it 8 to 12% returns, fairly diversified across a number of different instruments that are out there. So my big like growth thing is Bitcoin. For a lot of the other stuff, it's more like I like to see money hit my account every month and then I reinvest it into the growth
Yeah.
because it's just so hard to time the market, right? It's like I can sit here and dump everything into, it's like a good example, I'm kind of going on a tangent, is that like I rolled an IRA that I had in 2020, in the December of 21,
Yeah.
and it took till the middle of 24 to get back to where it was. So it's like 2.5 years. Because when the market drops 20%, you got to go up more than 20% to get back to where you were. And so I've always found it very hard to time equities. And so like I like the Bitcoin side because I think that the number will go up because of all the things we talked about earlier. And I think that one's an easy one to wrap my head around. And then I like the stuff that generates income because that gives me money to then deploy into growth. And then I like the hard assets with the real estate stuff. So kind of like I'm fairly diversified, but I'd love to hear your take on it. I mean, that's just kind of my general portfolio.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest one is obviously oil and gas. We were very fortunate with One Energy to sort of not only sell but then create a new vehicle that the team went on and did an amazing job with Franklin Mountain, which sold to Coterra this year. So through that, through overrides and stock, I have quite a bit of oil and gas exposure. Honestly, it's probably more than 50% of my total
And Franklin was a unicorn, right? I mean, it was like a multi-billion-dollar deal.
Yeah, it was they did a Fed sale for about 150 million, 157 million in 2018, the same day that they bought the remaining assets of One Energy for about 100 million, I think. So they put 250 in, 257, and then drilled a whole bunch of wells. But the Permian was incredible. The team did amazing, and I think the final number they sold the Coterra for was like 2.5 billion. Um,
Wow,
and
that's crazy.
so, yeah, it was an incredible result. It was a phenomenal team, just super smart people, and honestly, like as my former partner knows, I always said the rock is the rock, and we found some pretty darn good rock at One Energy, and it worked out. So I have a huge amount of oil and gas exposure. I am very very bullish natural gas because I think in order for this trade deficit, like to actually create things in the United States that we can sell to balance trade, LNG is one of the most obvious ones. And when you look at the arbitrage, as you know better than virtually anybody, the arbitrage between European natural gas price and the US onshore natural gas price is at times 5, 6, 7, 8 to 1. If all of a sudden you start exporting 20, 30 BCF a day of American natural gas and you bring that into Europe and you bring that into pick your country, it doesn't even matter. Now you have a much more balanced trade, and the world runs on natural gas. I think that we've gone too heavy into electric cars. I mean, I own a Tesla. I own it because I'm thanking Elon for saving democracy, not because I care about climate change. And it is the fastest car I've ever owned. I mean, it's the S Plaid is incredible. I love it. It's so much fun. But we should be having like compressed natural gas vehicles. We should be having hybrids. So I just think
Yeah.
natural gas is going to play such a massive role. And I think this summer, with what we saw in Spain, as like it's not even hot yet. And with the amount of renewables and solar, and all of a sudden hail knocks out a solar farm, and then all of a sudden it doesn't get windy. I think you're going to see rolling brown and blackouts in the United States, and it's going to terrify people. And what you're going to see in Europe is going to be equally terrifying, and it's going to make people just jump on the natural gas train. So I am very, very bullish actual natural gas pricing over the next 3 to 5 years. And I think in the shock periods, you're going to see gas go to like 450, $5. Like it's sneaky jumped up to 355 year strip. Remember
Yeah.
what, a year ago we
Yeah.
were sitting 250, 225, and people were like, this doesn't work. And without anyone even talking about it, the strip is up 50% on 5 years. I don't think it would take much to be 455 year strip this summer, and then think about what the natural gas companies in the United States are going to do from equity standpoint. So that's where I am. And then
Yeah.
obviously my hard assets are real estate, in part with you. And I just believe that there is an arbitrage of people who can't afford homes but want to rent homes. Because if you can't afford a $2 million second home, but you can afford 2 weeks of vacation a year, I think that there's a market for that. And so in Denver, I'm building two high-end luxury houses that are rebuilds. But if they don't sell,
Sweet.
I'm going to rent them at 15, 20,000 a month to people who don't have, the down payment for a $3 million house and 25,000 a month for a mortgage, but they can afford, until the interest rate comes down, they want to live in a really swanky house and they want their money in the S&P. They don't want it in real estate. So I do
Yeah.
think there's a coming market for that. So that's how I'm deployed right now.
I think, well, I mean, I need to clarify earlier about the oil and gas stuff. I mean, I've been very exposed to natural gas and oil through a proxy of having a service company, but for years, my income was a huge chunk of it was tied to like percent of proceeds type of natural gas marketing contracts that we had
Right.
via our company. And I rode the waves of that up and down through times like 2022, where it was kind of euphoric and you have a great year to times like and I mean I remember in 19 whenever we were selling gas in Oklahoma and have percent of proceeds deals and prices were like 20, 30 cents some months and you're like, can we make payroll? So I have, I would say, like a lot of my net worth has been driven by commodity prices, but today, I still have equity in the company, which is we're not really the business now isn't really taking price risk anymore. We've moved completely away from that for the most part, but we are still tied to the success of our clients, many of which are natural gas producers, and helping them with hedging and protecting that price. But I do agree with you that the natural gas, I think, in the near term and medium term, has got to catch a bid higher than where it's been. And I've been wrong my whole career a lot talking about higher natural gas prices, but there have been some real structural changes, including AI. And some of the things around LNG and a more interconnected world for hydrocarbons. So I think it's a good play,
Well,
especially in the next 18, 24 months.
me too. And then in the oil thing, like sneaky, the US is going to decline 500,000 barrels this year. And we do not have the capacity to grow anymore. We just don't. We don't have the inventory. We don't have the balance sheets. Notwithstanding, the guys are going to continue to drill because they're worried about debt to EBITDA metrics and this nonsense. But at the core, like if the US drops 500,000 barrels a day and global demand continues to grow 1 million barrels a day, which there's really no reason for it not to, I don't see how oil does not go 80, 85, 90 in the next 12 to 18 months. Like think back to 2022 where we had just this flood. Like the SPR is down 300 million barrels from peak, and that all this Trump talking down prices, are guys really investing in the right infrastructure and the right barrels? And I'm not sure they
Sounds like
are.
sounds like a good conversation for the second episode. We touched on oil and gas here at the end, but we could like do There's so much to talk about in the energy space, and it's where you and I have both done a lot of podcasting. I think we could pretty much do a lot for episode 2. We did get some questions here and some people in the comments. Ryan, on the hedging question, you can reach out to me on the side. I can get you in contact with people that are traders, and I also don't want to get in trouble because we're a registered company. I have to be careful what type of advice I give publicly. But and then David, I appreciate the kind words in the comments here as well. But I don't know, DRW. I gotta run here in a little bit or here
Let's
in a
do
minute.
it.
But how do you want to end it?
Yeah, I think we just end it like this. I think as we evolve, I think there's a lot of things to talk about. I'd love to hear those who listened. What do you guys want to talk about? What do you want to hear about? Do you want personal stuff? You want investing stuff? You want how we view the world in terms of like how we allocate assets, how we raise our kids? I'm all game, and Max and I, we are partners in Broken Bow. I'm really excited to do like a 20-year collaboration with him on real estate assets, etc. And so I think we're here, and we're just trying to figure out what the best way to deploy our capital is, and how to be good humans. So that's where I'd leave it. And then yeah, let's start at oil and gas in the next episode.
Hey man, dude, it was fun. All right,
It was
we'll talk
fun.
soon. Thanks guys for tuning in.
Love you, buddy.